Hi everybody, Dave Prowse here. Today I'm going to install a new network attached storage device into my network. And this is a Synology DS218 NAS box. And we'll be putting in two 4 terabyte Western Digital RAID drives and going to upgrade the RAM on this as well. So let's get started now. First we'll take a look at the device real quick. You can lift the front door right off. And it's pretty nice because it has these grommets that help to reduce sound. So instead of a door that clasps shut, it actually closes with these grommets. Nice engineering feature. And if we look here, we've got our two bays. Just press on the tab to pull the bay out. And another nice feature here, and we'll zoom in a little bit. If we take a look at this, we see new grommets on here. This is a little bit of a different design, and I like this so far as well. And those are for holding the hard drives in place. So that's very nicely done. And we'll take a look at the device itself. Now, this is new as of the recording of this video. Just came out, and this video is recorded in October of 2017. So it won't be new for long, but this is the new one for now, the DS218 Plus. And I currently have a DS216, and they've added some features onto this, which are nice. Now, like most NAS boxes, you have your standard lights, your status light, the local area networking connection light, and your 2 disks status. But they've added a USB 3.0 port on the front, which is great. You know, if you want to just copy some data to a flash drive real fast, great way to do that. And we also have a power button as well as a reset button. So 2 separate buttons. Nice feature. In addition, older devices from Synology had 1 gigabyte of embedded RAM. This one has 2 gigabytes embedded RAM with the option to add with a SODIMM, with laptop RAM, which we will do. And if we take a look at the back, we see here we have 2 USB 3.0 ports. We also have our RJ45 for our gigabit Ethernet connection. And then we have an external SATA. This eSATA port, I don't usually use these. I'm not really a fan of external SATA drives in general, but it is a good backup solution to go beyond, say, a RAID1 array. So it is a possibility. And it's a good way to move a lot of data and then transfer that, make it portable. And then you have security and power and your fan. So pretty straightforward. Now, if you get the 4-bay version of this guy, not only can that do RAID 5 and RAID 6 and RAID 1.0, but it comes with a second RJ45 port, which allows for fault tolerance or for link aggregation, which is a nice feature. I almost went for that, but wasn't really necessary at this point. The 2 drives should be fine, and we'll set up the 2 drives as a RAID 1 array so that the data is written to both drives simultaneously. And like I was saying, I have a DS216 on the network now, but that has 1 terabyte of storage, and I'm quickly filling that up. So I'm going to move up to 4 terabytes and run that as a RAID 1, and then use the old box as a backup device. So let's install this now. And we want to make sure we have our anti-static protection going on because we are touching components here. So we'll take this RAM out and always hold this by the edges. And this is going to go in just like laptop RAM. In fact, it is laptop RAM. We'll put that in on an angle. Make sure it's in the slot. And press down on both edges until it clicks into place. And there we go. We just upgraded this from 2 gig to 6 gig. Then we can get to the drives. Now again, when you're working with these drives, you want to make sure you're using the correct drives that you need for your application. And put these into the trays now. And here's one of the trays. And a little bit of a different feature than they used to use. You have these rails that come off. And we can kind of pop these off. And then put the drive in. Always making sure not to touch the circuitry there. Put the drive in this way. But now that this guy's in there, now you have the option. You can use some of these screws in, say, the middle section here, but don't use them where the grommets are. They're not necessary because we have these rails. And we put the rail in, just snap it into place. And do the same with the other one. And that's going to keep the drive stationary. So you could put those screws in the middle ones if you wanted to, underneath there. But is the additional stability really necessary? And will it pull too much on the drives? It's better to have the drives kind of floating within the grommets, the soft grommets. And as long as it's stationary, you're in good shape. And this way, you're not really pulling on the edges of the drive. You know, if you screw it in, that can actually pull the edge away, the surface of the drive away, and it could cause damage over time. So this is the better way to do it. And I like the technology with that. And so we can just slide that guy in, snap him into place, the SATA connection and power connection go in, and the tab locks. And we'll do the same with the other drive. Okay, and place this guy in. Snap him into place, and it all looks good. Then we can put the cover back on, get rid of this plastic. And again, I really like this technology with these grommets. It just fits in the opening. And you just press it down, and you're done. And it kind of floats off of there a little bit here because of those grommets. So you're not going to get any vibrations from the door. And so there's our box. He is now ready to rock. He's been upgraded with 4 gigs of RAM up to 6 gig. And we put the two 4 terabyte drives in there. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and hook that guy up to the network. Okay, so we've hooked everything up and everything looks good. The status lights are good and I'm sure it's running fine. But now we're going to connect through the browser and see what we have and do some configurations. And my guess is that through DHCP, this guy got .101 on the network. But if you ever want to connect to these guys, you can do an http:// and just do a disk station :5000 for the port. And enter. And it sees the guy, so it got us in there. So I actually want to change the IP address and do a couple of other configurations for this. So we'll click on Setup Now. And we'll go and do the installation of the Disk Manager software, the Disk Station Manager software, or DSM. Install that now. And it says, I understand all data on these hard disks will be removed. Well, that's okay because we're going to be doing a RAID1 array. So we'll let that installation go through and then we'll come back and do some configs. Okay, so that took several minutes and the disk station restarted and automatically brought us to the next page within the browser. So it reconnected, which is nice. You could also connect by IP. And like I say, I think this guy is .101. That's just a guess, but you know, this is good because it just automatically passes the information through on your browser, so you don't have to reconnect as you're doing each configuration screen. But in the future, once I do set up a static IP, which I like to use on these devices, you know, then that's how I'll connect via the browser. So here we need to create the server name and the account. And so we're going to call this guy NASBox-218. Username, we'll just use admin. And password. Type in a complex password now. Okay, we're not going to share the network location with Disk Station. I want this guy to be really something that I'm just going to access locally for now. And I'll click Next. All right, that's going to go ahead and prepare the storage space. And I might change the username later instead of just using admin. What's really important is to have a complex password. Always very important. So we'll click next here. And as far as updates, for my needs, we're going to do the download, but we're not going to install them automatically. We're going to install them manually because there may be some plugins and some components that I don't want automatically installed. And smart tests on the drive is a good idea. Using smart to check the hard drives, verify if they're working properly is good. And enable bad sector warning as well. So you know if you're having some issues with the drive, so you know in advance if you should change one out. So we'll leave that. Leave those check marked and click next. I am not going to do a quick connect ID right now. We're going to skip that. And I'm not sending anonymous information. I almost never do this type of thing. And go. Okay, we'll close out some of this stuff and we'll take a look at the system health. Okay, what do we have? We are indeed on .101, and I want to change that network IP. And we see we've been up for 15 minutes. Right now, the CPU and RAM usage, not very much. It's not really doing anything, but it says the disk station is working well. So let's take a look. We're going to go to the control panel. And we're going to go to network. And I want to change that IP that we're using. So we'll go to network interface, LAN. And you can see here it's using DHCP. So we're going to edit that guy and use a manual configuration. I'm going to use 250 for this. That's what I want to use to connect directly, and quite often on my test networks and for customer networks, I'll use 250 as the main storage space, as the IP address for that. And otherwise, everything's fine. This is the subnet mask I'm using, and that's the gateway address for this particular network. And I'm not worried about IP version 6 or 802.1x at this point. So that's it. We'll leave that guy as manual on 250, okay it, and then you may or may not have to reconnect when you change IP addresses on NAS boxes of this nature. But at this point, when I do connect in the future, I will do it with this IP address. And you can see it has changed that automatically for us to 192.168.41.250:5000 for the port number. So that is good. Okay, so now it's time to take a look at the hardware and make sure everything has been installed properly. And what I'm interested in is the RAID array and also the RAM that I added to this guy. And so if we go here to the main menu, we see I have a lot of options here, including the storage manager. And so we'll go to the storage manager now, and that'll give an overview of the volume we have here. And if we go to volume, it shows volume 1 is SHR. And that is the Synology Hybrid RAID. Effectively, in this case, it's just RAID1. It's just their version of RAID1. You could remove this and then set it up as RAID1 or RAID 0 if you wanted that. But by default, it's basically a RAID1 setup. Data protection of 1 disk fault tolerance. So both of our Western Digital drives are part of the same volume. If we look at that overview here. This is one volume called Volume 1. It's 3.5 terabytes because that's what you really get with a 4 terabyte drive. And it shows that we've used 60 megabytes. That's just from the installation of the Disk Manager software. And so this is good. It's running normal, and it's a RAID 1 setup. So again, you could remove this and you could modify it as you wish, but not really necessary. I see the same performance and with RAID 1 setup and with this RAID 1 setup, it doesn't really make a difference. So the drives look good, and as we showed here, it says the disk station is working well. They understand that you want to have the data written to both drives. So now we want to check that RAM. So if we go to our control panel and go to the info center, we'll see here what we have. Here's the model name and the CPU we're using, which is Celeron J3355, which is actually an upgrade from previous models. 2 CPU cores, and total physical memory, well, it's 6 gig. So that's good. It's got the 2 gig embedded, and we've got the 4 gig stick that we added. So we're in good shape. Thermal status is normal, and everything looks good. We maybe want to change the time zone and a couple other configurations like that, but that all looks good. If we go to network, we see the information. We changed that IP address of this guy. Everything looks good. If we go to storage, we see the volume. We can't make any modifications from here, but we can look at it and see the temperature and the status of the disks. And so you might also notice we're using the BTRFS file system here to be superfluous. We're using BTRFS on this system. Okay, and finally, what we need to do is make a shared folder that will house all of our data that I'll copy everything over to. So I'll create one now, and we'll just call this Data Master, and we'll call this top level folder, and automatically it's going to put it in volume 1. You can have additional volumes if you wanted to. You would have to remove the volume and then repartition the drive, but I like it as is. This is how I'm going to use it. And we have a recycle bin on here, which is nice also. So if someone was to delete something over the network, now if you work with other Windows computers and you delete something on a remote Windows system, it's gone normally. But here it has a recycle bin. So if someone deletes something that's located inside here over the network, you can get it back. And you can set that up for an X amount of time. We can also encrypt this folder, which is a good idea. I'm not going to do that right now, but we'll create that guy, go to OK. Okay, and we can add permissions based on the users that we create. Normally in a small network, you'd create users within the user section here with the same username and password that they use on their system. In bigger networks, well, then you'd get into the domain side of things. We'll click OK for this. And if we go to domain, we could add this to a domain. Like I have a couple domains running here, like dpro42.com. This guy could join up with that domain, and then it would pull the information as far as usernames and password from there. So if anybody tries to connect to the files and folders, they would be authenticated by the Windows server, by the domain, instead of by this device. But for smaller networks, you can just create individual users and match them up with the username and password that they utilize on their local systems. Okay, so now that we've created our data share on the NAS box, and by the way, I did create an individual account for myself that I didn't want to show, but I created that on the NAS box, and it matches up with this local system. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and map a drive directly to that NAS box, to that share. So we'll go to Computer, Map Network Drive, and I'll use the Y drive here, and it's going to be /192.168.41.250 because I love mapping by IP address. And then the name of the share was data-master. Press enter, and boom, we're in there. So there's the path to that guy. And at this point, we can create additional folders if we wanted to, or we could start the file copy that we need to work on here. And I've got a folder that I do need to copy. It's a work folder from the old NAS box. So we're going to take that guy now and begin the copy. And I'm marking the time right now in minutes and seconds and checking. We're going to see how long it takes to move this data. And so we're looking at real time, and then we'll do the math and see exactly what the throughput was for this device. Because I want to compare this to old device that I'm using, the old DS216, and and also compare it to my servers and how fast they move data. And you can see we're only 1% complete here. This is a huge folder, a lot of data, and so it's going to be a good test of the performance of this. Now, for this particular test, the computers and the NAS boxes are all connected via Cat6 to a gigabit switch directly. And the two NAS boxes are connected directly to the switch. So we're just going from one NAS box to the switch to the other NAS box. And again, Cat6 connections with patch cables for that. So we'll see how long it takes to do these 28,021 items. And pause the video and come back and analyze it a little bit. Okay, so we've moved a ton of data, a couple different tests, and the big test was this work folder here, which was about 200 gig, and it averaged between, the device averaged between 68.5 megabytes per second all the way to 75.6 megabytes per second. And generally, the average, after doing the math, is about 72 megabytes per second, and that's from NAS box to NAS box. And it's doing just about as well, perhaps slightly better, with my Windows 7 and Windows 10 computers writing data to it. And it's the writing that I'm most interested in. The reading, haven't really tested that, but I'm assuming that'll be close. But pretty much around 72 megabytes per second to the drive. And that's, remember, that's writing to both drives, the RAID1 drives at the same time. Now, again, my reasons for installing this is just for personal storage for work, you know, mostly for videos and audio files. Anything that I'm working on, if I'm actually working on a project, I'll work on that on my G drive here. And that guy is a PCI Express flash drive, and it's super fast. So I work on everything locally on that. Then the idea is to drop all those projects onto the NAS box. There's other things on the NAS box that I will grab, like images or Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. But generally, the projects that I work on locally and back them up to this, and then this gets archived to another location. So while a higher data transfer rate might be nice, it's not really necessary for me. So a box like this is good for an individual or a very small business or for the home use. But as you move on into larger networks, if you have more than, say, 5 employees in your company, then you probably want to look at some other solution. But the solutions will work in pretty much the same way. So, you know, it looks pretty good. The data is transferring fairly quickly. Now, let's take a look here. When I went to buy this stuff, shopping is very important. You want to make sure you're purchasing devices at the cheapest price you can get them. And also you want to make sure that they're available. And so, you know, quite often I'll go to Amazon or several other shopping portals, for example, Newegg. And it just so happens that all this stuff I bought from Newegg in this case. And here's the DS218. The problem with other shopping portals was that for some reason they were charging an $18 shipping fee. You have to watch for that with new products. There's no reason to pay that. And so I wasn't going to shop with any other portal. I was going to save that 18 bucks by getting that directly from Newegg, and there was no shipping costs, and I got it in 2 days. And so I also got the 4 terabyte Western Digital drives, and there was a code, and that took $5 off every drive, so each drive was $129. So that was a good deal. Got an extra $10 off total. So that's a savings of $28. Those shipped in 2 days. Everything was good. And then finally, the 4 gig upgrade. This particular device needs, you know, laptop memory, SODIMMs, 1 SODIMM, and it's DDR3, and it's known as DDR3L 1866, otherwise known as PC3L 14900. And so this is what I used. I used some HyperX, and it seems to be working pretty well. there are more expensive types of RAM that you could get. This has a latency of 11, but this is the proper speed for what the box needs, which is important. You have to have the right speed, and it's got to be the right capacity. And so we showed that we are up to 6 gig. And nobody had this RAM available. It was actually kind of hard to find 1866 DDR3L for some reason at a reasonable price. RAM is volatile. Prices of RAM are, it's like the stock market. It's so volatile sometimes, and the availability can be very limited. So I was able to get it from Newegg in this case. Nobody else had it for a reasonable price, at least. So you really got to shop around, one, for price, and two, for availability. You know, go to Newegg, go to Tiger Direct, go to Amazon, go wherever you have to go, and, you know, get your product that you need at the price that you want in the time frame that you desire. Okay, so the NAS box is up and running. System health is good, and I'm actually copying more data right now, and you can see you know, altogether it's looking at well, it was hovering at 116 megabytes per second, now at 48 megabytes per second on the LAN, and back up to 134. But honestly, the average has been about 72 megabytes of data transfer, and I'm pushing data onto this box from one computer and from another NAS box right now, and the CPU usage is only 20%. So we probably could throttle this a little bit. We could probably throttle the file transfer, the file station portion of this box. And, you know, we could probably push a bit harder onto this guy. And there's a couple ways that we could do that. There's some tweaking, and I bet you we could get this guy a little bit higher. Now, if you look at the throughput performance that is quoted here, 113 megabytes per second reading, which I'm not too concerned about. It's the writing that I really am worried about. And that says 112 megabytes. Well, again, on a Cat6 connection, you know, gigabit Ethernet switch, brand new, by the way, and Cat6 patch cable connections from another NAS box from Synology and from a Windows 7 and from a Windows 10 computer, it's all hovering around 72, 75 megabytes per second for me to the drive. So, and that's usually what you see. Now, as far as my usage goes, compared to the DS218, we're looking at about 8 to 10 megabytes per second faster, moving the same types of data. That's writing to the drive, that is. So that's good. Definitely an increase there, but I'm not seeing the numbers that they show here, and you usually don't. You usually see like 75% of that or thereabouts. Okay, so that's about it for this video, for this installation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at my website, davidlprouse.com.